Dude. Yellowjackets is crazy. So, I'm not sure if this show gets the accolades that it deserves, but Yellowjackets on Showtime, a network that churns out a good show once every, decade, has officially given us a gem. Suspenseful, dramatic, intriguing, funny, dark, and more importantly, well-written. I haven't watched a show with this much attention to detail in quite some time. Now on its third season, the story revolves around two timelines. A group of teenagers in the 1990s whose plane crashes in the Canadian wilderness on their way to a national soccer championship tournament, and the survivors as their adult selves attempting to deal with their trauma, and boy, oh boy, do they suffer from some serious trauma. The only kind of trauma that comes from 2 freaking years stranded in the woods eating each other. Yeah, it's that kind of show. Think Lord of the Flies mixed with that Uruguayan rugby team that crashed in the Arctic back in the 70s. Absolute wild shit, pun intended. But it isn't just the premise of the show that drags you in. The show does a fantastic job with the casting of the characters from both timelines, which certainly deserves some praise by the casting crew. Not only do they get actors who look like super realistic versions of their older and younger counterparts, but their personalities mesh perfectly together. Be it the outcast equipment manager Misty Quigley, the narcissistic and violent Shauna, the self-sabotaging head case that is Ty, or the tragic story of Natalie and her struggle with sobriety and happiness. All of these traits are embodied by both past and future selves of each character, and witnessing the transformation and maturity, or lack thereof in some cases, is an absolute pleasure to watch. And that's just the characters. Let's talk for a minute about the underlying parallels and metaphors the show brilliantly portrays. Of course, it's obvious that the show at its core is about the survival and mental breakdown of these teens stranded in the wilderness and its effect on them in the future. But let's take for a minute to analyze the themes hidden in the show. This show tackles such heavy topics such as religious extremism, social hierarchy in its rawest form, the effect of dissociative personality disorder and PTSD, and the innate primitive nature of human beings when modernity is completely stripped away. I'm sorry, but that's my kind of show. Let's take the first example of religious extremism. Lottie is a fascinating character in that she's the only one that we know of who is on serious antipsychotic medication. So of course, when it runs out, she has to learn how to cope with whatever condition she has to be in, be it audiovisual hallucination or some kind of otherworldly psychic anomaly. Personally, I believe Lottie suffers from a form of schizophrenia and is using her episodes as premonitions, something that must have been super common in history when looking at cases like shamans in the Mayan Empire or the Salem witch trials. I mean, think about it. Mankind's understanding, or lack thereof, of mental illnesses back then led to the only explanation available at the time, a religious experience, which brings us back to Lottie. We see in season 1 as Lottie slips further and further into her delusions, she begins to attribute these visions to the wilderness, a godlike entity that channels its wants and needs strictly through her. She literally becomes the shaman of the group, and the rest of the girls, starving and desperate themselves, look to her as a leader of sorts, resulting in a type of primitive theocracy between the girls. It's an absolutely mesmerizing phenomena. But even more interesting is what that does to the group from a hierarchical perspective. In the early seasons, before the wilderness belief system encompassed the entire group, sans Coach Ben, the group was literally split between the believers and the non-believers of the wilderness. There were those like Shauna who were still clinging on to reality and the hope that they would make their way out of there, whereas people like Van, who survived a wolf attack, and others looking for answers to their traumas, joined in on prayer sessions and rituals forming from Lottie herself, resulting in an in-group, out-group structure. Interesting enough is that these girls were already part of a team before the crash, so there was a preconceived rank of seniority, rookies, and leaders that bled into the first few days, few weeks, and even months of them being in the woods, most notably Jackie. You see, Jackie's an interesting character. Although physically weaker than girls like Van and Shauna, she had this kind of high school popularity influence on the girls, especially on the soccer pitch. She was even told so by the principal that she's not good at dribbling, she's not good at scoring, but she had this influence over the girls that was intangible. But in the wilderness, her relevance and usefulness began to sink dramatically until she was looked at as a literal liability. So much so that her own best friend ostracized her from the group and exiled her out of the cabin home. I mean, I'll leave it there to avoid spoilers, but still. Seeing the group develop itself into its own functioning tribe consisting of leaders, hunters, gatherers, religious figures, and the other weak serf-like class is a testament to the nature of early human societies such as ancient Egypt and their religious-led pharaohs seen as literal gods, or those with special connections to the gods, or feudalistic England showing clear parallels between those who have and have not. It's these underlying themes that make Yellowjackets one of the most unique shows I've ever watched in years. So being one of me and my wife's favorite shows, she always comes up with these little theories that are either really out there or make perfect sense. But one of them harps on the theme that I mentioned earlier about the effect of severe trauma, PTSD, and identity disorder, and that's how the wilderness is absolute nonsense. For my skeptics and non-religious people out there, this one's for you. The show does a great job making it seem like there's some kind of cosmic force that has found and connected itself to the girls post-plane crash and is now the cause for such strange incidences like the dead birds falling from the sky and the gust of wind that put out the fire. If you know, you know. But as the series goes on, more and more gets revealed to us and leaves breadcrumbs towards a more realistic solution. It seems like a particular part of the woods contains a high level of toxic gases such as methane that have led to decaying wildlife, strange discoloration in the water, and less than desirable living conditions. Couple that with both starvation, tribalism, and the ever-decreasing sense of hope that will be found, and you have yourself a recipe for disaster. Thus, when the girls finally come home, think about how messed up they must have felt. To be drawn into not just a belief system, but a nomadic, survivalist lifestyle, just to be thrusted back into modern-day Americana, must be full shell shock for these girls. Some of them decided to resort to drugs, alcohol, and even self-deletion to numb the pain of their past, while others buried it deep within themselves in an attempt to start back up again as young adults. We even hear that Lottie has been in and out of psychiatric facilities for almost a decade before her foray into establishing a wellness community. That was in air quotes, by the way, cough, cough, cult. But with others that haven't tackled their trauma head on, we get cases such as Thaisa, who is clearly suffering from dissociative personality disorder and is in need of serious treatment, or Shauna, whose violent past has finally seeped into her adult life decades after her suppressing it for so long. Case in point, Adam Martin. Unfortunately for most of these characters, instead of addressing their trauma and getting the psychological help that they need, well, except for Natalie, who really tried until getting sucked back in by the others, look to the past in order to make sense of it, using terms like, we brought it back with us, and it wants what it wants. This show isn't just some spooky horror story about spirits in the woods. In fact, it might not be that at all. But instead, at its core, simply may just be about the devastating and lasting mental effects of being stranded in the wilderness for over 2 years. I mean, that makes sense, right? And quite frankly, that's where I personally believe the story is going. But nonetheless, you can't argue with the fact that this show isn't one of the most entertaining, innovative stories ever told, especially in 2025. Now with only a few episodes left in Season 3, strangely we haven't heard of Yellowjackets being picked up for a 4th season, which is kinda weird. Last year, we only were a couple episodes into the 2nd season when Showtime announced that we'll be bringing it back for Season 3. So this leads me to believe that they're either A, milking the current season to make it seem like everything is coming to a conclusion to gain more viewership, or B, this actually may be it. Will the girls finally get rescued only to come home to a world they barely recognize? Will the adults tie up all the loose ends and mysteries surrounding their current selves and all the strange events surrounding their lives? Well, I guess only time will tell. But there's one thing I know for sure. Whatever happens, this has been one hell of a ride. 2 giant non-cannibalized thumbs up. And that's all I have to say about that. Guys, let me know what you think about Yellowjackets down in the comment section. Do you guys love this show? What do you think about what's going on in the current season? You think the girls are going to get rescued? What do you think about the whole Lottie situation? Just try to keep it spoiler-free, because I do have people that I want to entice into watching the show. But you do what you gotta do. I can't hold you back from anything. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. It's Muddy88, AJ from Queens. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that crap. I don't gotta say it. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Till next time.